It's 2 in the morning and you're still awake, replaying a sentence you said 5 hours ago. You're turning it over, examining every angle, wondering if it landed wrong. Your friends call it a flaw. Your boss calls it inefficient. You call it exhausting. But what if the thing keeping you up at night isn't a malfunction at all? What if it's one of the most sophisticated tools your brain has ever built? Most people treat overthinking like a disease to be cured. Self-help books promise to switch it off. Podcasts frame it as anxiety in disguise. But the real explanation is nothing like most people assume. Overthinking isn't your brain failing to relax. It's your brain running a simulation, testing outcomes before you commit to them in real life, because for most of human history, getting it wrong wasn't just embarrassing. It was fatal. To understand why, you have to go back. Long before spreadsheets and group chats, your ancestors lived in small bands on unpredictable land. A wrong guess about which berries were poisonous didn't just cost a stomachache. It could end a life. A misjudged rustle in the grass could be wind, or it could be a predator crouched low and waiting. The brain that survived wasn't the brain that reacted fastest. It was the brain that ran the scenario first. This is where evolutionary psychologists Marty Hasselton and David Buss enter the story. They studied a pattern they called error management theory, the idea that when the cost of 2 mistakes is unequal, natural selection favors the mind that leans toward the cheaper error. Assuming danger when there is none costs you a moment of unnecessary fear. Assuming safety when there is danger can cost you everything. So your ancestors' minds tilted, generation after generation, toward caution. Toward checking twice. Toward replaying the moment before acting on it. That tilt didn't disappear when humans started building cities. It didn't fade when survival stopped depending on spotting predators in tall grass. Your brain still runs the same ancient software, just pointed at new targets. The predator in the grass became the email you haven't sent yet. The poisonous berry became the wrong thing you might say in a meeting. The mechanism is identical. Only the stakes have changed shape. But that's not the whole story. If overthinking were purely protective, it wouldn't feel so miserable. There's a reason lying awake at 2 in the morning doesn't feel like wisdom, it feels like torment. And this is where psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema's research becomes essential. She spent decades studying what she called rumination, the tendency to fixate on a problem without moving toward a solution. Her work found something crucial. Rumination and reflection are not the same process wearing different names. They are 2 different roads that can look identical at the start. Reflection asks a question and searches for an answer. Rumination asks the same question over and over without ever letting itself find one. Reflection moves forward. Rumination loops. And this is the fork in the road that determines whether your overthinking becomes a strategic advantage or a trap you can't climb out of. So what was really happening in your brain during that 2 a.m. spiral? Nolan Hoeksema's studies suggested the loop itself was doing something specific. It was keeping a problem in the front of your mind, unresolved, because some part of you believed the problem wasn't finished being solved. That's not weakness. That's your mind refusing to file something away as safe until it actually is safe. The tragedy is that the loop often runs long after the useful thinking has already been done. But here's what most people miss. The same intensity that makes overthinking painful is what makes it powerful when it's aimed correctly. People who think deeply before acting tend to catch errors others miss entirely. They notice the inconsistency in a contract. They sense the shift in someone's tone before it becomes a real conflict. They prepare for the version of the conversation that could go wrong, so when it doesn't, they're already 3 steps ahead. This isn't anxiety. This is forecasting. And forecasting, done well, looks a lot like foresight from the outside and feels a lot like dread from the inside. The real question is why some people get trapped in the loop while others use the same mental machinery to move ahead of everyone around them. The answer came later, from an unexpected place: the language people use when they think. Psychologist Ethan Kross researched what he called chatter, the repetitive negative thoughts people direct at themselves, and found something that reframes the entire conversation around overthinking. The problem was never the thinking itself. The problem was the distance, or lack of it, between the thinker and the thought. Cross found that people who mentally stepped back and addressed themselves by name, or used the word you instead of I, while working through a problem, could break the same loop that trapped others for hours. The exact same worry, examined from 6 inches further away, stopped spiraling and started solving. And that changes how we think about this. Overthinking was never really about how much you think. It was about your relationship to the thoughts themselves. A person drowning in a loop and a person using deep analysis to outmaneuver a problem might be running nearly identical mental processes. The only difference is whether the thinking has an exit. This reframes something else too. Every industry that rewards careful, high-stakes decision-making is, in some sense, built on the same trait people are told to suppress. Surgeons who mentally rehearse a procedure before making the first incision are overthinking, by definition. Chess grandmasters who calculate a dozen branching futures before touching a piece are overthinking. Writers who rewrite a single sentence 11 times until it finally says what they mean are overthinking. Nobody accuses them of a flaw. They call it mastery. The difference between a spiral and a strategy was never the volume of thought. It was the direction. There's something else worth noticing. The people most likely to be labeled overthinkers are often the same people others quietly trust the most. The friend who reads a text message 3 times before replying is usually the friend who never says something careless. The employee who drafts an email and rewrites it twice is usually the one whose messages never need damage control. What looks like hesitation from the outside is often precision from the inside, running invisibly, the same way your ancestors' caution ran invisibly beneath the surface of a decision that looked instant but wasn't. And this is where everything comes full circle. The 2am spiral and the careful surgeon's mental rehearsal are built from the same ancient material. One is the loop without an exit. The other is the loop with a destination. Your brain never stopped being the same forecasting machine that once scanned the grass for movement and hesitated before eating an unfamiliar plant. It just needed somewhere to point that machine, and something to interrupt it once the forecast was finished. So the next time you catch yourself replaying a conversation, or drafting the same message for the 5th time, or lying awake running through every version of tomorrow, notice what's actually happening underneath the discomfort. That isn't a broken mind keeping you from rest. That's an ancient survival system, refined over hundreds of thousands of years, still trying to protect you from a threat that no longer exists in the shape it once did. The tool itself was never the problem. It was only ever a matter of learning where to aim it, and when to finally let it rest. It's 2 in the morning again. But this time, you're not just replaying the sentence. You're watching your own mind work, ancient and precise, still doing the job it was built to do all along.